Okay, hi everybody, it's Nick from Global Distribution. Thank you everybody for taking the time to join our webinar today on the Infortrend CS series. Our colleagues from Infortrend, Anthony, who is Head of Marketing for UK and I believe parts of Europe, is also on the line. I realise this is sort of a difficult time for quite a lot of people, and you're probably also getting webinar fatigued, bombarded by requests for your time. So thanks very much for letting us have yours. Anthony, did you want to, are you there?
Hi Nick, yeah, thank you for that. Just very briefly from me, to just sort of reiterate what Nick has said there, is thank you very much for joining during this time. As he said, there'll be webinars galore coming up in the future, I'm sure, for all of us. So thank you just for spending a few minutes with us and with Global Distribution to find out a little bit about our Scale Out NAS product. So yeah, just to reiterate what Nick said, thank you very much, Nick, and over to you to begin.
Perfect. I believe everybody should have the ability to send questions through, and if you send them through while we're going, and we'll do some Q&A at the end. I'll do my best to get through them for you. So let's, with no further ado, let's get started. The agenda for today is just a quick overview of storage industry trends, which I'm sure will be a slide that everybody shows and you're all, I'm sure, familiar with. We'll move on to the CS, what it is, some product highlights, some advantages versus the competition of the CS appliance, some target information applications, and then Jade from Infortrend will join us just for a quick word on their new champion partner program that they're rolling out at the moment. And then I'll just round off with the Q&A at the end, and just a heads up on the next sort of Infortrend Global webinar that's coming down the track. So as I said, this is a slide that no doubt everybody will be way familiar with. It just encapsulates the sort of the growth expected in the future over the next 5-6 years. I'm sure you're all familiar with this kind of storage trend. You know, data is just growing and growing. You know, thanks to different ways of capturing it, the advent of 4K video and all these sort of things are driving that trend forward. So no surprises there. I'm sure everyone on the call is familiar with that. So what is the CS? So Infortrend have got a very good reputation and been in business for a long time, protecting your customers' ones and zeros. Their RAID engines are pretty ubiquitous. They have a really good in-depth knowledge and product portfolio of both block storage, the fiber channel iSCSI, but also network storage with their GS series, and that's clustered. So this clustered, the EonStorCS is their Scale Out NAS system, which is the kind of next logical evolution of their technology so far. So one of the interesting things about the CS that does immediately differentiate it from the competition is the fact that it's not only scale out, whereas you add more devices and you can increase your capacity and performance in a linear fashion. I'm sure everyone's familiar with that. We'll go through it later, but the CS also supports vertical scale up. So you can just add expansion systems to the nodes to grow out the capacity without having to add more nodes to gain performance. So if it's a kind of a capacity driven environment, the CS has some extra tricks up its sleeve to help deliver the systems that your clients are after. So just a quick over snapshot of what the CS is good at, product highlights. It's high performance capacity, it's easy to scale. As we'll see, it's a very flexible platform design. So there are 16 bay and 24 bay 3U and 4U nodes and expansion systems. There's also high density 4U 60 disk nodes and expansion systems. So you can immediately see that it's quite easy to build a NAS, Scale-Out NAS system to suit many different applications. It has, obviously, as you would expect, complete data protection, and we'll go through that to prevent critical data loss. There are some higher security features for self-encrypting drives and other features for increasing security. And then probably, as you would expect in this day and age, the management of the system, the interface is very easy and set up is straightforward and easy to for an administrator to do their tasks of setting up users and looking after the system day to day. In terms of performance and capacity, like any other scale-out system, we can scale, or the CS series scales into the hundreds of gigabytes a second of read and write. We can go to a maximum of 144 nodes at the moment, and that would put us in the 100+ petabyte category. So one of the nice things you'll see for the CS is that you can start small and grow quite large indeed. So as you would expect from such a system. For those of you not maybe so familiar with Scale-Out architecture, here's a quick slide to go through it. So typically with a Scale-Out architecture, you have a single namespace, which is one file system. And that file system is made up of cluster. And that cluster is a set of multiple nodes, which is the I/O and the disk. So the node is the unit that provides the data I/O, capacity, scale out, and data services. And those of you that are familiar with products like Isilon, the CS is architected in a similar way, where you have front end ports for data delivery to the client, and you have rear side ports for the cluster for all the nodes to be able to talk to each other. But that all happens over Ethernet. There's no need for any InfiniBand connections, as there is in the Isilon system. So let's have a look at those scale-out features. So as I said, there's two ways to expand the system. One is via horizontal scale-out, whereas we can see here we have node 1, 2, 3, up to 144 nodes effectively in the same cluster, and as you add another node, you're growing the same capacity, same performance, and the system scales out. But we also have the ability with this, as you can see, to add scale up nodes. So each expansion enclosure can be expanded by a series of expansion nodes just to increase the capacity. So it gives us two methodologies to fulfill different requirements. You'll probably also be familiar, if you're familiar with Isilon and such products, the concept and object storage of erasure coding. Without going into too much detail, effectively, what erasure coding does is take data, in this case D, chops it up into multiple pieces of information, adds parity, M in this case, which is associated with that, and then that information is effectively distributed over the nodes in the cluster. For erasure coding, the take-home message here is that you need a minimum of 3 nodes to implement erasure coding, but for the best configurations for high capacity utilization, so not losing, what that means is not to lose too much capacity for the number of nodes in your system, Infortrend sort of recommend that a 5-node starting point is the best optimization for capacity, and especially also for media, for streaming data. Infortrend do have a second mode which allows you to start from only 1 node, and they call this distributed mode. So this is where Infortrend's proprietary algorithms distribute the data between multiple nodes. It doesn't have the performance penalty, if you will, of calculating parity for erasure coding or data replication. But the disadvantage of it is that you don't get any protection against a node failure. So if you have for example, in this instance, 6 nodes. If one of those nodes were to fail, until you bring that node back online, the data is not present in the cluster. The advantage of it is that for a small facility, they can start with 1 node and grow up from there. As you might have expected for scale up capacity expansion, when you scale the nodes by adding an expansion system, JBODs as they're referred to here, you have to add a JBOD with the same kind of capacity to each of the nodes. So if you have a 3-node cluster and you want to add expansion systems to it, you have to have equal number of expansion systems. So in this case, we can see that each of the nodes has a single expansion system connected, and that would have the same configuration of hard drives in it. In terms of the formats for the expansion systems, we have a high density, we can connect 1 high density 60 disk system, which is a 4U, or you can connect up to 3 16-bay or 3 24-bay systems to the nodes to increase the capacity of those nodes. In terms of design, there's another neat feature that Infortrend have is that they can support a mix of all flash nodes and hard drive nodes. So again, ideal for streaming media. You can have 2 pools of data. One might be an all flash pool required for high performance data streaming, and then the other pool could be your hard drive pool, perhaps in those large capacity 60 disk systems, and that could be for the customer's kind of work in progress volume. So often facilities are waiting for their clients to confirm, you know, whether to proceed or not with a project, waiting for changes to be authorized, etc. So data can be tiered between the all flash pool and the hard drive pools to provide the optimum balance of performance and cost per terabyte for storing larger amounts of data. All the CS systems have underlying RAID protection, and then on top of that, you can implement your erasure coding, replication, or the Infortrend's data distribution solution. So the CS RAID engine is based on the same RAID engine that they have in their other products. So they have very fast rebuild times, and the customer can actually, or the administrator can actually set the rebuild times in the system so that they can allocate the amount of processing power going to those rebuilds, so they can kind of either speed it up or slowing down. In terms of optimal configuration, just to let you know, for the RAID systems, Infortrend for a streaming environment, you'd be looking at, for a 16-bay, you'd be looking at 2 RAID 5s, each of 8 disks, for example, on a 16-bay. That would give you the best performance building those nodes out into a cluster. In terms of other data protection features, we've obviously got the data protection for the disks. If you're running erasure coding, then we also have data protection for the nodes. So if you're running a 3+1 or a 4+2, you can either lose 1 or 2 nodes in your cluster before data becomes unavailable. And Infortrend also support cluster protection, so that a single cluster can be replicated to a remote cluster. So should one site fail due to, you know, fire, flood, or you know, loss of power, etc., any of those kind of scenarios, that data would still be available at a second site or across a campus, for example. Here's just a slide talking about a little bit of the guidance. I think what I just mentioned in the previous slide about the data protection, the various different erasure coding policies can be set 2+1, 4+1, 4+2. So that'll let you can work out from here, or this, that depends on the amount of hard disks that would be available at usable capacity, depends on the erasure coding or the replica policy that's sort of set when the systems are configured. And again, cluster protection, we can either do local cluster protection, so the clusters could be replicated locally, or as is shown a couple of slides previously, the system also supports remote cluster protection. So the cluster could be across a campus or anywhere with a wide area network link. In terms of extra security features that I sort of mentioned at the start of the presentation, Infortrend have an offering for self-encrypted drives. So there are certainly for government institutions, and they are all looking at self-encrypted drive technology, but we are seeing an increasing number of requests come through from post facilities or agencies for those self-encrypted drives, so that the data is encrypted as what's called when at rest. Another feature that Infortrend has, again, probably not for those of you involved in the media market so interesting, but it does support the write once, read many times, the worm functionality. So data written to the disk can't be changed once it's written. It can't be deleted, it can't be modified, it can't be overwritten, but it can be read. So again, that's probably more for compliance type applications, government, etc., but the system does support it. In terms of easy management, as you would expect from Infortrend, they have an easy web-based UI, which they call Eon One, and that is designed for use by administrators and users. There are a couple of levels of administrator. There's the highest level of administrator that would typically deploy the cluster, set up the systems. There's a mid-level administrator that was able to grant, create folders, shares, users, and allocate user access rights to those folders. So it's very easy for one admin to manage an entire cluster. In terms of flexible design, as you'd expect from these systems, everything's replaceable. So sort of controller boards, host boards, fans, power supplies, etc., are all modular and easy for maintenance. Probably worth mentioning here that the standard, the system ship with a 3-year maintenance, return to base hardware, support and software. You can extend that to 5 years. You could add advanced replacement, and you can also upgrade to next business day and same day on site. Servicing, spares kits, etc., are all available. So we just have a quick recap over some of the things that I've mentioned here. So key to take home is it supports both scale out and scale up expansion. It offers 3 protection modes. Obviously, we have the underlying RAID protection per node, but then on top of that, we're adding that erasure coding, either replica, which is literally, as it sounds, replicating files, and then the Infortrend's distributed node, which allows you to start just with one node and utilize a lot more of your capacity. Very easy to deploy and management. Deploy and manage, apologies. 5 minutes from power on to set up a system, to decide the erasure code level or whatever, and build your RAIDs and things like that. And it's only about 30 minutes or so for that complete initialization to be done. Because they're using RAID protection underlying, there's no performance impact when rebuilding. There's also no data loss when several drives fail in multiple nodes, because we're effectively got the RAID protection, and then on top of that, we're adding the erasure coding, replica and distributed data protection on top of that. Here's just a couple of slides on versus the competition. There's one here for Cumulo, and there's one here also for Delhi EMC Iceland. In general, they're both the same. You know, there are always relatives, advantages, disadvantages to certain systems. In general, Infortrend have a higher throughput for the hard drive models. They can start with smaller clusters. They have in-node disk protection. It would probably be fair to say that Infortrend is certainly much more cost effective than Isilon or Cumulo, although potentially it may not have all the feature sets that are required for price per terabyte or price performance. It certainly is a very attractive proposition. I think I have a couple of target applications, and then I think we've got a couple of use cases. So our focus is really obviously around media and entertainment, or those kind of creative industries, from sort of streaming media for post-production, or 3D modeling, VFX, those kind of things. Surveillance is obviously becoming is another massive growth industry. High performance computing, for those of you guys that are involved in that, or specifically oil and gas. I know Infortrend have had quite a lot of success in Asia, where this CS series was first deployed and announced with that kind of oil and gas application. And then again, for media archive or general archive, high capacity disk archiving, as I said, using those 60 disk systems, we can fit the 16 terabyte hard drives to those at the moment. So that will obviously single node, 60 disk, 3 nodes. You can quite easily see in a rack how you could scale up to some quite high capacities in a pretty cost effective manner. Just a couple of quick case studies of deployments that have happened with Infortrend already. This one is for a 4K HD ProRes application for post-production. I think they've got 28 users running a mixture of Adobe and Final Cut. Read performance of about 14 gig a second, write performance of about 12 gig. This was done using their CS4000 series. So something that we haven't covered is there are three models broadly. There's the 4000 series, which is the highest performing system. There's the 3000 series, which is the mid-range system. And then they have their 2000 series, which is their lower performing system, which is targeted at that kind of large bit bucket archive, active archive type market. So for this one, they were using the 4016, which is their higher performing 16 bay 3U, had 8 nodes. Each of those nodes had an expansion, 2 expansions, and there's a total of 384 disks running a RAID coding of 4+2 and an underlying RAID 6. And the network topology was actually 25 gig. It says 25 gig on the front end, and internal networks 25 gig. The diagram is slightly wrong, saying 10 gig, but that's worth mentioning that these systems are 10 gig as standard, and there are options to upgrade to 25 gig front and back end and 40 gig front and back end. And for those of you that are familiar with the Infortrend system, for their other models, will know that the host boards are swappable. So as 50, 100 gig becomes more ubiquitous, Infortrend will obviously be announcing those host boards, and it will be possible to upgrade the system to have faster front and back end connectivity as technology advances. The second application was a TV station, many more clients, 100 workstations, a lower total performance requirement, and so they were using just 3 of the 3000 series, but the 24 bay, so that's with 72 hard drives. We're still using a RAID coding with an underlying RAID 5, and front and back end network connectivity was 10 gig, yielding them a performance of a little under 3 gigabytes a second. So those are just a couple of quick examples of where we're at. So just to say a little something about going forward, we are going to be running a series of webinars that around the kitchen table with global distribution. Obviously, everyone's going to be working from home for the foreseeable future. So as I said, I know you're probably going to be bombarded for requests for webinars. We're going to try and keep them as interesting possible. Obviously, we're competing against Amazon Prime and Netflix or Disney Plus. But maybe you'll have all watched your box sets and decide to watch something else instead. So we'd love to get your feedback and ideas. So please try and stay in touch with Global and Infortrend. Use our social channels. Any suggestions for webinars that you'd like on storage? We're pretty flexible. You know, we're looking for your feedback on how you want the information delivered. So just a quick one: to book any personalized one-to-one webinars to go over the CS series with your customers or just with yourselves for a deeper tech dive, then do reach out to any member of your global team, your account manager, or simply drop sales at Global Distribution a line. We are going to be running our next Infortrend webinar on the 31st of March at 4 o'clock GMT +1. Daylight saving is kicking in Europe, I believe, next Sunday. And that will cover the Infortrend GS series, which is a unified block and NAS platform, with some more information on the partner program. And of course, we'd also be happy to talk about the CS again if people want to hear more about that. But for now, I think that was just a bang on the half hour. So hopefully you all found that informative. I don't know whether we've got any questions come through. Anthony, is there anything?
It doesn't look like we've got anything in the chat at the moment, Nick. But obviously, just to reiterate that, thank you all for joining. If anyone does have any questions for us, they can either come to Nick or Kelly Locke, who's obviously our BDM and is in charge of a lot of the media entertainment business that we're doing at the moment. So please do reach out to Kelly or Nick if you have got any more questions. So thank you all for joining. I must say thank you to Nick for doing the presentation for us as well. Big thank you to yourself. And that's all from me.
No problem. Well, make sure that everyone that was registered got a copy of the presentation from us. And we'll go from there. Just respond to us, whoever needs to be, for any further information. But thanks everyone for your time. Stay safe, wash your hands, and I hope and wish all your family well. Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.
Bye.